Imagine paying over $30 for a single pound of coffee. At first glance, it might seem absurd, considering that you could grab a standard bag of ground coffee at your local supermarket for less than $6. Yet, for those who know, for the aficionados who can detect hints of jasmine, blueberry, or dark chocolate in a sip, that $30 bag is not just coffee, it is an experience, a craft, and the result of immense effort spanning continents. This is the hidden world behind your morning cup. A world where farmers rise before dawn to pick cherries by hand, where entire communities depend on the unpredictable yields of coffee trees, and where global markets determine whether a grower thrives or starves. If you've ever wondered why single-origin specialty coffee is so expensive, the truth lies not in marketing hype, but in the extraordinary journey from farm to cup. Before we dive in, I invite you to stay with me until the very end of this story. By the time you finish, you'll never look at coffee the same way again. And if you've ever thought of specialty coffee as just a luxury, this will change your perspective. So grab your favorite brew, settle in, and let's uncover why single-origin coffee costs so much, and why, for many, it's worth every penny. More than just coffee. Coffee is one of the most consumed beverages in the world, second only to water and tea. Every day, more than 2 billion cups are enjoyed globally. Yet within this massive industry, a divide exists between commodity coffee, the bulk, mass-produced beans that supply most supermarket shelves, and specialty coffee, the carefully cultivated, meticulously processed beans that earn descriptors like floral, fruity, complex, or bright. The price difference between these categories is staggering. Commodity coffee often trades on the New York Stock Exchange for less than $2 per pound, while single-origin specialty lots can sell for more than 10 times that amount. At retail, it's not uncommon to see $25, $30, or even $50 bags of coffee in cafes and specialty stores. But this cost doesn't materialize out of thin air. It is built layer by layer, from the farm laborers who nurture the coffee trees to the roasters who coax out each bean's unique character. To understand why single-origin coffee is so expensive, we need to begin where it all starts: the soil, the climate, and the farmers. Growing coffee, the foundation of flavor. Coffee begins its life as a cherry, a fruit that thrives only under specific conditions. Known as the coffee belt, this narrow strip of land stretching between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn includes countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, Colombia, Brazil, and Guatemala. Here, altitude, temperature, rainfall, and soil quality converge to produce the flavors coffee lovers prize. Growing specialty coffee requires meticulous care. Farmers select specific Arabica varieties, such as SL28 in Kenya or Geisha in Panama, that are known for their complexity. These varieties are fragile, often yielding less than their hardier Robusta counterparts, and they require constant attention. The trees must be pruned regularly, shaded from excessive sun, and protected from diseases like leaf rust. Unlike commodity production, where maximizing yield is the goal, specialty farming prioritizes quality. Every decision, from planting density to soil enrichment, is aimed at producing cherries with vibrant, distinct flavors. This level of detail demands higher investment. Farmers often pay more for better seedlings, organic fertilizers, and sustainable practices. These costs add up long before a single bean is harvested. Harvesting, labor-intensive precision. Harvesting is one of the most crucial and expensive steps in specialty coffee. Unlike commodity coffee, which may be strip-picked by machines or workers who collect cherries regardless of ripeness, specialty coffee requires selective handpicking. Farmers and laborers walk through rows of coffee trees, carefully choosing only the ripest cherries. These cherries are deep red, bursting with sugars that will translate into sweetness in the final cup. Underripe cherries produce sour flavors, while overripe ones taste fermented or unpleasant. The challenge is that coffee cherries on the same branch ripen at different rates. This means workers must return to the same trees multiple times during the harvest season, often spanning weeks or months. Each pass requires hours of labor, and because the process cannot be automated without sacrificing quality, farms must rely on large teams of pickers. In Kenya, for example, workers may earn only a few dollars per day for this grueling labor. Yet this is the step that directly determines whether a lot of coffee will qualify as specialty or fall into commodity grade. If a farmer cuts corners here, the potential for exceptional coffee disappears. This human effort, tens of thousands of cherries handpicked to yield a few pounds of roasted coffee, underscores why single-origin beans come with a higher price tag. Every cup reflects not only the soil and climate but also the painstaking work of people whose skill and endurance shape flavor. In many ways, harvesting is where the art of specialty coffee truly begins, setting the stage for everything that follows. Commodity versus specialty coffee, the divide. Once harvested, coffee begins its journey into one of two markets. Commodity coffee is bulked together, often stripped of origin identity, and sold at prices set by global markets. Specialty coffee, however, is kept separate, with each farm, cooperative, or microlot traced and evaluated on its own merits. The difference is not just marketing. Commodity beans are valued for consistency and volume, not for nuance. Specialty beans, by contrast, are graded on a 100-point scale, with anything above 80 considered specialty. Factors like acidity, body, sweetness, and aftertaste are scored by certified cuppers, professionals trained to detect subtle flavors. The result is that a commodity bag of coffee might taste coffee-like and uniform, while a single-origin specialty bag could offer notes of citrus, jasmine, or even tropical fruits. Consumers are not just buying caffeine, they are buying terroir, craft, and distinction. This grading system incentivizes farmers to pursue quality, but it also raises costs. Achieving a high score requires investment in farming practices, meticulous processing, and careful storage. And even with all that effort, weather, pests, or market shifts can still devastate a farmer's income. Farmers take on the risks of quality but are not always rewarded fairly, since even a small dip in a score can downgrade a lot's value significantly. For buyers, though, this divide guarantees access to remarkable flavors that justify the higher price tag. Sorting, separating the best from the rest. After picking, cherries must be sorted. Workers meticulously separate ripe cherries from underripe or damaged ones. This can be done by hand, floating them in water, or using mechanical sifters. The goal is to ensure uniformity, only cherries at the peak of ripeness move forward. Sorting is another labor-heavy stage, requiring precision and patience. Any oversight here risks contaminating a batch with defective beans, which can downgrade the coffee's quality score and drastically reduce its value. For farmers who rely on specialty premiums to survive, this attention to detail is not optional, it is essential. Sorting doesn't stop at the cherry stage. Once the beans are extracted and dried, they are again sorted to remove defects such as insect damage, cracks, or discoloration. Each round of sorting reduces the final volume, meaning farmers sacrifice quantity to secure quality. This sacrifice reflects the uncompromising standards of specialty coffee. Out of hundreds of kilos of raw cherries, only a fraction makes it through all the sorting stages. Every defect removed is potential profit lost in terms of volume, but it protects the farmer's reputation and ensures that what reaches the roaster is exceptional. It's a painstaking filter, designed to protect integrity and preserve the delicate flavors single-origin coffee is celebrated for. The washed process, unlocking brightness. One of the most common processing methods for high-end coffee is the washed, or wet, process. After cherries are picked and sorted, they are pulped to remove the outer fruit layer, leaving the beans covered in a sticky mucilage. These beans are then fermented in tanks for up to 72 hours, allowing natural enzymes to break down the mucilage. This fermentation stage is critical. If it's too short, beans retain a slimy texture that interferes with drying. If it's too long, beans can develop undesirable flavors. Farmers must monitor timing, temperature, and cleanliness with scientific precision. Once fermentation is complete, beans are washed in clean water to remove the remaining mucilage. This produces coffees with bright, clean flavors, hallmarks of Kenyan and Ethiopian lots. But the process requires significant infrastructure, pulping machines, fermentation tanks, and abundant access to water. For small-scale farmers, these costs are prohibitive unless they join cooperatives that share resources. The washed process is laborious, time-sensitive, and resource-heavy, but it produces some of the most prized coffees in the world. Each washed lot represents a balance between science and tradition, where farmers combine generations of knowledge with careful experimentation. The reward is coffee with unmatched clarity, acidity, and vibrancy, making it a favorite among specialty buyers. And it's another reason why single-origin beans command such high prices. The method itself embodies craftsmanship and risk few can afford. So far, we've seen how growing, harvesting, sorting, and processing demand immense labor and investment. Yet the journey of single-origin coffee is far from over. The beans must still be dried, milled, roasted, and transported before they ever reach your cup. Each of these steps adds both cost and complexity, and each plays a role in shaping the flavors that justify that $30 price tag. Now we'll follow the beans through drying yards and roasteries, explore the brutal economics that leave farmers struggling despite high retail prices, and uncover the global dynamics that make specialty coffee not just a luxury, but a story of survival. Drying the beans, a delicate balance. Once coffee beans have been pulped and washed, the next critical step is drying. The beans, still encased in parchment, must be reduced from nearly 60% moisture down to around 10 to 12%. This is not just a technical detail, it is a matter of preserving flavor, preventing mold, and protecting months of labor. Drying can take place in different ways. In Kenya, beans are often spread on raised beds made of wire mesh or wooden frames. These beds allow air to circulate freely around the beans, preventing uneven drying. Workers constantly turn the beans by hand, ensuring that no side sits too long in the sun. In wetter regions, plastic covers may be pulled overhead to shield the beans from sudden rainfall. In other countries like Brazil, beans may be dried on large patios, where they are raked into even layers and exposed to direct sunlight. This process is more efficient for large volumes, but it carries higher risks of uneven drying if not carefully managed. The drying stage can last anywhere from 7 to 21 days. Too fast, and the beans risk cracking, leading to instability during roasting. Too slow, and they may ferment or develop mold. Every detail matters, because mistakes here can destroy the potential of an entire harvest. The labor is constant. Workers must be vigilant from sunrise to sunset, protecting the beans from moisture, pests, and contamination. And when the sun goes down, the beans are often covered with tarps to protect them overnight. In many ways, drying is where the farmer's patience and precision are most tested. Unlike harvesting, which is visible and immediate, drying is a quiet process of waiting, adjusting, and protecting. Yet the difference between perfectly dried beans and poorly dried ones can be the difference between a cup of brilliance and a cup of disappointment. This stage is the invisible safeguard of coffee's flavor, and it is one of the reasons specialty coffee holds its value. Milling, unlocking the green bean. Once beans are dried, they are still not ready for export. They are covered in a parchment-like layer that must be removed through a process known as hulling. This is part of what's called milling, the stage where dried parchment coffee becomes recognizable green coffee beans. Milling often involves large, specialized equipment, machines that can gently crack and separate the parchment from the bean without damaging it. The beans are then graded and sorted by size, density, and weight. High-quality lots are distinguished not only by their flavor but by their consistency. Buyers expect uniform beans that will roast evenly, and achieving this requires yet another round of labor-intensive sorting. Defects are meticulously removed. In many producing countries, this is still done by hand. Workers sit at long tables, scanning through thousands of beans to pluck out anything chipped, discolored, or insect-damaged. For smallholder farmers, every defective bean removed represents a financial loss, but it also represents the difference between scoring as specialty or slipping into commodity. The final step in milling is bagging. The beans, now clean and uniform, are packed into burlap or jute sacks, often lined with plastic GrainPro bags to preserve freshness. Each bag typically weighs 60 kilograms, about 132 pounds. These sacks are then prepared for transport, stacked into containers, and shipped across oceans to roasters around the world. By this stage, the coffee has already undergone months of intensive work, but its journey is only halfway complete. Milling is often overlooked by consumers, but it is one of the most decisive phases in ensuring the coffee's integrity survives the long voyage ahead. Without precise milling, even the most perfectly grown and processed beans could lose their potential before ever reaching a roaster's drum. Roasting, science meets art. When green coffee arrives at its destination, whether it be a small specialty roaster in Portland, a cafe in Berlin, or a multinational coffee company, the beans still don't resemble the coffee you know. They are pale green, grassy in aroma, and nearly undrinkable. Roasting is the transformative process that unlocks their flavor. Roasters carefully control time, temperature, and airflow to coax out the unique attributes of each bean. For specialty coffee, the goal is not to mask defects but to highlight origin-specific notes. A Kenyan SL28 might be roasted lightly to preserve its bright acidity and berry flavors, while a Guatemalan lot might be roasted slightly darker to emphasize its chocolate and nutty tones. The roasting process itself is delicate. Beans go through stages of drying, caramelization, and the first crack, when steam pressure causes them to expand and crack audibly. Small shifts, just a few seconds too long, or a temperature spike of a few degrees, can drastically alter flavor. Roasters often test multiple profiles for each lot, roasting small batches repeatedly until they find the perfect expression. This experimentation costs time, beans, and energy, but it is essential to delivering a coffee that lives up to its specialty status. And this, too, adds to the final cost. Specialty roasters invest in high-tech machines, employ skilled roasters, and spend countless hours perfecting roast profiles. Each bag you buy represents not just beans, but the artistry of roasting. For many drinkers, the roaster is the unsung interpreter of coffee. Farmers shape the raw potential, but roasters translate it into a sensory experience. The crackling sound of beans in the drum, the shifting aromas, and the precise adjustments of heat are all part of a performance that balances science with intuition. This is where coffee becomes culture, and where every sip begins its final transformation from hard green seed to aromatic cup. Drying and milling costs add up. Many consumers underestimate just how expensive it is to move coffee from cherry to green bean. Drying patios, raised beds, storage facilities, milling equipment, and defect removal all require infrastructure. For smallholder farmers, these costs are insurmountable without cooperatives or government support. While a Guatemalan lot might be roasted slightly darker to emphasize its chocolate and nutty tones, the roasting process itself is delicate. Beans go through stages of drying, caramelization, and the first crack, when steam pressure causes them to expand and crack audibly. Small shifts, just a few seconds too long, or a temperature spike of a few degrees, can drastically alter flavor. Roasters often test multiple profiles for each lot, roasting small batches repeatedly until they find the perfect expression. This experimentation costs time, beans, and energy, but it is essential to delivering a coffee that lives up to its specialty status. And this, too, adds to the final cost. Specialty roasters invest in high-tech machines, employ skilled roasters, and spend countless hours perfecting roast profiles. Each bag you buy represents not just beans, but the artistry of roasting. For many drinkers, the roaster is the unsung interpreter of coffee. Farmers shape the raw potential, but roasters translate it into a sensory experience. The crackling sound of beans in the drum, the shifting aromas, and the precise adjustments of heat are all part of a performance that balances science with intuition. This is where coffee becomes culture, and where every sip begins its final transformation from hard green seed to aromatic cup. Drying and milling costs add up. Many consumers underestimate just how expensive it is to move coffee from cherry to green bean. Drying patios, raised beds, storage facilities, milling equipment, and defect removal all require infrastructure. For smallholder farmers, these costs are insurmountable without cooperatives or government support. But even when farmers have access to these systems, the costs of labor are rising. Workers who turn beans on drying beds or sort defects by hand may earn less than $10 per day, but the sheer scale of labor needed drives up the farm's overall expenses. When these costs are distributed across a limited yield, the per-pound expense skyrockets. This is why specialty coffee farms often operate on razor-thin margins. The retail price of $30 per pound might seem high, but by the time costs are distributed across growing, harvesting, processing, and exporting, farmers often take home shockingly little. The price of coffee, a harsh reality. Here lies the paradox of specialty coffee. In wealthy countries, consumers pay premium prices, sometimes $5 for a single cup at a cafe. But for the farmers who grew the beans, profits remain elusive. In Kenya, for instance, the average coffee farmer earns less than $2 per day. Even when their coffee scores high on the specialty scale, they may receive only a fraction of the final retail price. Middlemen, exporters, importers, and roasters all take their share along the way. Commodity coffee is even worse. Prices often drop below the cost of production, leaving farmers in debt or forcing them to abandon coffee altogether. This instability is one reason why many young people in producing countries are reluctant to continue farming. Specialty coffee is supposed to offer an escape from this cycle, paying premiums that reward quality. And in some cases, it does. Farmers who produce truly exceptional lots may earn several times the commodity rate. But these cases are rare, and for every farmer who succeeds, many more struggle to break even. This economic imbalance is one of the most controversial aspects of the coffee industry. It is also one of the reasons why single-origin coffee is so expensive. Part of what consumers pay for is not just flavor, but an attempt, however imperfect, to support farmers in a system stacked against them. The human side, lives behind the beans. Behind every cup of specialty coffee is a human story. The farmer who wakes at dawn to walk the fields, the worker who handpicks cherries under the hot sun, the family that depends on a single harvest to pay school fees or medical bills. In Kenya, coffee has historically been grown on small family plots. Farmers may own just a few dozen trees, producing a few hundred pounds of beans per year. Entire communities rally during harvest, with neighbors and relatives joining to pick cherries. The work is grueling, but it is also a tradition, passed from one generation to the next. Yet many of these farmers see little reward. While consumers in New York or London sip a $6 pour-over and discuss notes of blackcurrant, the grower may be struggling to afford basic necessities. This inequality is at the heart of the specialty coffee conversation. For many advocates, buying single-origin coffee is not just about taste, it is about ethics, sustainability, and justice. Global trade and single-origin identity. Another reason single-origin coffee is so expensive lies in traceability. For a bag to be labeled single origin, it must be sourced from a specific country, region, farm, or even microlot. This level of transparency requires additional logistical effort. Instead of bulk shipping massive volumes of blended beans, exporters must carefully segregate and document each lot. Labels must trace the beans from farm to exporter to roaster, ensuring authenticity. Importers and roasters often pay premiums for this transparency, because it adds value to the final product. This identity also contributes to demand. Consumers who buy single origin want a story. They want to know that their beans came from a small cooperative in Nairi, Kenya, or a hillside farm in Antigua, Guatemala. This narrative elevates coffee from a commodity to an artisanal product. But building and maintaining that narrative comes at a cost. Why the cost will likely keep rising. Climate change adds another layer of complexity. Rising temperatures, unpredictable rainfall, and new pests threaten coffee crops worldwide. Farmers must invest in disease-resistant varieties, irrigation, and protective measures, all of which increase costs. At the same time, demand for specialty coffee is growing, especially in markets like North America, Europe, and Asia. As more consumers seek out single-origin beans, competition for limited supply pushes prices higher. Unless systemic changes address farmer compensation and climate adaptation, the price of single-origin coffee will continue to climb. And for those who value flavor, ethics, and sustainability, paying the premium may soon become the only way to keep the tradition alive. Rethinking your cup. The next time you hold a cup of single-origin coffee, pause for a moment. Think about the farm workers who handpick cherries at dawn. Think about the hours of sorting, drying, and milling. Think about the roasters who experimented for weeks to bring out the perfect notes. That $30 bag is not just beans. It is labor. It is history. It is survival. Specialty coffee is expensive because it has to be. The real question is not whether it's worth the price, but whether we are willing to value the lives, landscapes, and legacies behind it. If this journey has reshaped how you see coffee, share this story. Support local roasters who source responsibly. Pay the extra few dollars for single-origin beans. And most importantly, remember that every sip is part of a much bigger picture, one that connects you directly to people and places around the world. Because when you buy single-origin coffee, you are not just buying flavor. You are investing in the future of coffee itself.